So let's open this thingy. Close this guy, and go to assignment 2. I am trying to get you used to functions calling other functions and things like that, because first of all, because it's very useful, and second, because the next topic is going to require it.
Now, just a comment or something. What I ran into a lot was a couple of folks ask questions, and they don't understand how a function operates, meaning that you pass it a value and it does stuff and then returns a value.
Yes.
So, I mean, I tried to explain it, but I don't think I did a very good job. But I don't know if you might want to cover that, because I got asked that more than once.
Okay, so that's right. What does a function do? It's like a function in math, right? Similar. Actually, yeah, let me go back then to assignment 1 and keep playing with it, right? And if you guys see something that tickles your brain, you are passing some value, right? When you are a function, when you're writing a function, you're going to have some inputs. In this case, what inputs is this function going to take? It's one input, right, and an integer, right? What kind of stuff do we return? A Boolean, right? And this return statement is how do we calculate, right? So it's going to evaluate this and then return that value. Now, let's go to something like main and call it, right? What happens if I call it is odd? First of all, I need to pass actual parameters there, right? What number do we want to pass? $17. Right? What does that do? It's going to calculate that value, right? So Java or the compiler generates code, right, that calls this function, that goes here, creates a pseudo variable n, right, calculates this value and then returns it, and then plugs it instead of that is out of 17 expression. So instead of is out of 17, what's gonna appear? True, right? It yields, it evaluates to true. Does that idea make sense? Now if I just do this, what does main do? Absolutely nothing. Right? If you run it, it runs. It doesn't do a thing because I'm not doing anything with this value. Right? What could I do with it? Well, I can print it. What other things can I do to values? Eventually I want to print stuff, but I can also assign it to variables, right? Does this idea make sense? What kinds of things can I put here when I'm passing a value? right? I'll put any expression that yields a number, right? An obvious one is a number. I could also use variables. I could also use other operations, right? I could do does this idea make sense? I could declare more variables, put whatever I want, right? And then what can I do with is odd, right? I can do, right? I can also use it in expressions. So I can do is odd A or is odd B. I can probably choose a better name. Does this idea make sense? What happens if I run this program? Absolutely nothing, because I'm not printing or doing anything with that value, right? If I print it, then I'll see, right? I think many times people get hung up on this idea of we see the pieces individually and we see how to combine them, right? But we don't necessarily see them combined, right? If you're writing is odd, right? Do you know what parameter you're going to get in? No, I just know that I'm going to get an int in, right? Do I know if my value is going to get printed? No, and I don't give a hoot. I just return the value. That's my job, right? Put your blinders on, calculate that thing, and let main worry about main, right? Do I even know who's going to call me? Who could call is odd? Main, but who else? Any other function or method you ever define, right? Does that idea make sense? So you're just defining general rules. You're not. Many times I tend to get those kinds of right. But am I gonna print? Like, no, you don't print. Maybe somebody else prints for you, or not. That's their problem. Right? Your job is to calculate a boolean given an int. That's it. Does that idea make sense?
So every file needs to have a main?
No. That is a good question. Yes. Every program needs to have a main because this stuff will run from main, right? Basically, when you run a program in whichever mechanism you use to run a program, what you're doing is running the main from that program. Does that make sense?
So it's like this is executable.
It's an executable. Yeah, that's where the execution is going to start. That's going to do everything. Now, you may have for a project a bunch of classes, and you normally have one class with a main, and then all the other classes are in support of that main, but don't have names on their own.
Then you have.
They just don't have main, and main calls them. Now, you can also have you could have projects that have more than one class with main, and then you can run each class differently. In Java, you package your things into jar files, and jar files usually have some horrible thing like a manifest or something like that says what's the main. So that's what will be run by default. But then you can also run your own and specify, right? Tell it to the Java to run the main from this other class. which is actually fairly similar to the kind of stuff that you can do with executables.
Okay.
Normally you run the executable from the beginning, but so they may have more than one entry point. So you could run one or the other.
So Java programs doesn't use the MVC, like the model view controller?
No, no. Now, this is good. Many times, right, since you are including libraries, you may not see a main. The main may be in one of the libraries that you include. For example, right, if you go look at the tasks, there is no main here. However, I can run it because Eclipse knows that this is a JUnit thing, and the JUnit library that I included actually has a main. And so JUnit would actually call the main from that thing instead of my main. Does that make sense? So if you're writing, and we may get a chance to talk and play a little bit with those things at the end, but if you're writing a program that has a web server or something like that for like an MVC, did you mean MVC as in web MVC or MVC as in Android MVC?
No, as in web.
Okay. What happens most of the time when you do something like that, you don't have a main. You do some horrible magic like this, and the library that you have, Spring or something like that, actually has a main and would run. So you never see the main, which is confusing as hell. But yeah, stuff like Android and things like that also don't have a very distinguishable main. Did that confuse you enough? Do you have any more questions about main, functions, the meaning of life? Probably assignment 2 is going to make the idea of functions even more confusing. So keep this in mind, right? When you are a function, and this is kind of probably the most important skill in programming, is the ability of creating abstractions and thinking abstractly, right? I'm a function, I look at my inputs, I produce my output. I don't care who's going to call me, right? It's not my problem. When I am outside the function and calling it, I want to think of the function as a black box. I don't give a hoot how it calculates it, right? When I look at isOdd, I don't care whether it uses the modulo operator, whether it uses bit manipulation, whether it calls a service on the network, right? I don't give a hoot. I just know that I give it an int and I get back a boolean with the right semantics, right? And so this allows you to do really complicated programs without actually having them in memory, in your memory at the time. Does that make sense? So at any given time, you're looking at one or two levels. You're looking at, okay, I'm here, this is what I'm doing, and this is the level that I'm calling, and that's it. I don't know what's behind it, right? So that enables us to do really complicated programs that look like magic, that look simple. So be prepared, because we are going to be doing functions forever. Actually, I make it so that almost every assignment is writing functions, except when we get to classes and then you write classes. But which I like because it will force you to think this way. The danger is that you seldom see a full thing, a full executable program that does something useful. But always. You're all clear on the idea of functions? Yes? Shall we go to functions and do evaluate stuff? We have a function. Here we have one example, multiply by 2, right? Just returns twice its argument. We have another function, read and double, that takes a scanner and a print stream, and it prints to the print stream, right? Where am I printing?
To the console.
Maybe. To whatever that print stream is, right? Maybe that print stream is attached to the console. Maybe it's printing to a file. Maybe it's printing to a string in memory, and you're never going to see that displayed. That's how I actually run tests. I cheat and I pass something that prints to a string, and then I can go look at the string and see if you did the right stuff. Does that idea make sense? That's why functions are useful. You don't know if you're printing to the screen, because you shouldn't really care where you're printing. You are a function, right? Where are you reading from? Again, you don't know. You're reading from that scanner. What's that scanner attached to? Who knows? Probably the keyboard. Maybe not. Does that idea make sense? And so, what does this function do? It takes a scanner, takes a print stream, it prints to that print stream, please enter a number, it reads from that scanner, and calls the next int method on that scanner that will give us an int, and then it returns that number multiplied by 2. Does that make sense? So let's go do this one. Read and add. We get a scanner and a print string, right? And now we need to read 2 numbers and return their addition, right? We can actually cheat and kind of do this, right? Call it number 1. Now, I could go to main and actually test it, right? Oh, I was actually giving you this example? Was this the code that you guys saw?
I don't think so. I had to define it.
Sorry?
I had to do a new operator.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, that shouldn't, but I just copied what I sent you. Ah.
I don't remember seeing it. I remember typing it in. Trying to remember what new did.
So we can call read and add, pass it this scanner. Actually, let me call it something like the scanner rather than in. And then system.out. And then what do I do with that value that's returned by this expression? Let me do something with it, right? Something like this. So you could run this thing, please enter number 3, another number 4, you get this on a 7, right? we can also go see if we did the right thing. May or may not be true. Oh, we need to go check it today too. Okay, now we got 25 points, right? Any questions about this?
Could you explain a little bit how does this parameter and argument works? Because for me it's kind of confused how you can expect a scanner and print stream output as a parameter, and when am I supposed to use it like this, like passing it as a parameter? Because I was expecting to use like the scanner only as a class with the new keyword and the statue.
But that's
when am I supposed to pass it as an argument?
all the time. 99.9% of the time. Maybe. Most of the time, right?
Okay.
When your function takes all these parameters, right? I mean, how else would you deal with a scanner? Right? That you have to take it as a parameter. Somebody else, whoever is calling you, creates a scanner, right? But the idea is that you don't. So you take most of your stuff, this function, right? You read an ad, you take this stuff as arguments, as parameters, and then you don't have to worry about how do you create a scanner. Whoever is calling you is going to give you one. Main or something that main calls, right? Probably main. In our examples, main.
Okay.
But maybe somebody else, right? Actually, my test code also calls this thing.
And why on the other method you was printing out of the screen and was not passing print stream out?
Which other method?
The assignment 1.
No, in assignment 1,
You
no
was just
method.
returning?
No method prints. All the methods in assignment 1 return stuff, right?
So every time you're gonna print it, you need to pass it as a
They never print, other than main, right? You think nobody else prints anything.
Yeah, my question is, when do you need to pass it as a parameter? Because, I mean, on assignment 1, we printed on the console without passing.
No, you did. When did you print on the console?
On main, when we was testing.
Main, yes. Main.
Main is where you instantiate it.
Yes, main is where you get scanners and system.out and those things.
So you never have to pass it. You always
Right?
just use
So no function printed. None of our functions printed other than main.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So when you return, you don't need it, but when you're printing, you need to pass it.
When you are returning a value, yeah. It's basically, in general, right? You need.
Let me show you. On 1, you use it print without passing.
Oh,
as a parameter.
use ESOL, yeah.
So
That is kind
how do I know when I use it and not use?
that there is no good rule. The good rule, or to me, the rule is as much as you can be pure, right? As much as you can give pass parameters, right? As much as you can, what you want is to make each individual thing easy, right? So if I'm a function that's going to print, right, then it probably makes sense for you are giving me an order, right? You're coming and asking me to do stuff. If you give me all I need, right? So you can give me all I need, the print string that I'm going to print to, this scanner that I'm going to read from, right? Eventually, and probably not in this class, but if I'm doing a database, the connection to the database, right? Because I need that to do my job. You need to give me the tools to do my job. Many times it is hard to if you do that to the extreme, it sometimes appears ugly. I still like it. I still really, really like when I can see my code, go look at main, and see exactly what the heck it does without magic, right? It's really cool. When it's actually connecting to database, here creates a connection to database, and I'm passing this connection all over. Sometimes it makes your code look ugly. Because you're passing many parameters. So that makes your code sometimes look ugly. We have other mechanisms, but for the most part, you pass it so that they can do their job, right? And ideally, you have pure functions. They have no side effects whatsoever other than returning value, like the ones we did in Assignment 1. In this case, you cannot have pure functions because you're printing to the screen, which means, right, you're modifying the state of that global thing. You only have one screen, one logical screen. You may have 7 monitors, but, right? And so, for the purposes of this class, in 2 years you can tell me if I'm wrong, but for the purposes of this class, assume that you would pass everything that is needed to every function. In fact, I didn't do it on Assignment 1 because we hadn't talked about scanners. But I think I do it all the time. It's more of a style issue. It could work without that. If you make the functions print to system.out, then they are less general, right? I could, to this function, I could pass it a scanner that's connected to the network, right? And a print stream that's connected to the network. So you could use this exact same function as a telnet server, for example, right? Whereas if you're reading from system.in and writing to system.out, you cannot do that. Or you have to do it outside the program, the redirection. So this makes it easy to also have it other things, which we are not going to do probably in this class, right? It's just, in general, you get everything that you need to do your job, and then you do your job. Like that makes this code very easy, right? Which scanner are printing everything from that one? It's just given to me, right? Kind of, you do all the prep work for the worker. Now, this is a matter of style and philosophy and things like that, right? Rather than mechanics. But in this class, I try to do it, and if I don't do it, it's because I was dumb when I was doing the assignment. Eventually, you need global state, but ideally, only main will deal with global state. So main will instantiate the scanners or the connections to the database or the whatever and pass them around. So we have read and multiply that does the same thing. Almost, right? Read 2 numbers, return the multiplication, right? Woohoo! Print all operations, and print all operations takes 2 numbers and a print stream, and it's going to print to that print stream, right? The sum, difference, and all the 5 operations, right? This one got a lot of people confused, right? Because the other 2 you weren't really getting any input other than the scanner and stuff. So they're like, oh, a lot of people try to read here on the scanner, right? Read from a scanner or something like that. Like, no. Those two numbers, right? And your job is to just produce output. We can write something like this. Some difference and so we can go see how else we could write it, right? It appears to work. How else we could write it? Well, first, we need the parentheses here. What happens if I don't put the parentheses? In this case, it would work, but it's going to print. It's going to convert the numbers to strings and then concatenate them, right? And so if I do it with minus, it's not going to work. And this is going to be telling me the problem, right? So, because it's trying to do this string plus this number, so I get a string, and now. So we need to add parentheses, or what a lot of people did, we need to create variables, right? Do something like this, right? That actually makes it look pretty. Now on main we need to create, right? Scanner call read and add, which we're doing here. Then call read and multiply. And then call print all operations with those things, right? Oh, I need to pass a print string. We get 100 points. Woohoo! Couple more philosophical things, right? It is reasonably okay to feel frustrated sometimes, right? Programming is frustrating and annoying and incredibly rewarding by the same, right? It's the same thing, right? You get frustrated and pissed at the computer for not doing the right thing, right? And then when you do it and you get it, you're like, woohoo, right? That is how it's supposed to work, right? That means that it's gonna be frustrating sometimes. the first couple of weeks of this class, especially if you've never done programming, are probably very frustrating because you're dealing with Git and GitHub, you're dealing with installing stuff on your computer, right? Which usually works, but only usually, not always, right? And then you're dealing with programming, right? So it is okay to feel frustrated. It is not okay to feel frustrated all the time, right? You should feel frustrated and then, right? And maybe actually chances are that this next assignment is going to be incredibly easy, right? And you're going to feel that it's a lot easier than the previous one. And then maybe some other week in the middle, you're going to feel frustrated. It is normal. It happens sometimes. Couple of things you can do to minimize frustration. Probably the main one, right? Start early. Start early and use me. Because many times you get frustrated and it's something that in hindsight is incredibly dumb. You miss the semicolon. You put a period instead of a comma, right? Like I did. But sometimes you don't see it, right? It's obvious to somebody else, but not to you because you're stuck in there. And you get kind of in an infinite loop yourself. So having somebody else can get you unstuck and minimize the frustration. So you need to be very aware of your own learning, very aware of how much frustration you can take, right? You want to be challenged enough that it is rewarding to get the assignments and things like that, but you don't want to be so frustrated that you start thinking about dropping the class or something like that, right? So starting early is gonna be the thing that can make the most difference, because then you don't have to be frustrated. You can work at it for an hour or two, and then send a pull request and say, "See ya, I'll see you tomorrow." And kind of spread out the frustration. But if you're feeling frustrated, it is normal. Sorry, I haven't found a way to make this stuff not frustrating. On the other hand, let me tell you this. This is your life from now on. Because in real life, you get the exact same thing, right? You're dealing with more complicated systems, more complicated programs, but you normally are dealing with stuff that is complicated, right? That's why you are doing it. And so you spend 3 days trying to figure out why the database connection is not working. And it is a semicolon problem, right? It's that you didn't realize that was an Oracle database rather than a SQL server, and so parameter string was wrong, and you spend 3 days. And sometimes the exact same thing happens. You go talk to the guy in the next room, and they're like, "Oh, you didn't see this semicolon. There's a new syntax now in JDBC strings, so you should use colon instead of semicolon." You go like, It happens a lot. So get trained in dealing with frustration. And don't despair, and don't minimize your frustration or use your frustration, right? You can also use it if it's making you say, "Yeah, I'm gonna beat this freaking program," then that's good. If it's telling you, "God, I should never have started to use computers, I'm gonna go move to a place that doesn't even have electricity," then that's too much frustration. So balance and manage this stuff. It is what it is. Let me ask. Are there any more questions about any of this stuff? No? Then we can spend the last 15 minutes working on assignment 3.